Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. I am the almighty Zentaco, and today we're going to be looking at 10 features you might not know are in Clickteam Fusion 2.5. So without further ado, let's get down to it. Here we go. This feature is grids, snapping, and tile paintings. So what you need to do if you want to activate grids and grid snapping is you click on these buttons here. You have show grid and snap to grid, as well as the grid setup. So let's show the grid, and we can also, like if we initially have it set to just show grid, we can see a grid, but it doesn't really impact what we're doing in the editor. But we can select this button here, snap to grid. Now suddenly our objects are going to snap to the grid. If you want to control the settings of the grid, click on Grid Setup, and you can control the width, the height, color of the grid, and here are the snap to grid, show grid. So all of that. But the best feature, this is paint. So if you click on the paint mode, now you can select any of your tiles or objects from this folder area here, and you can quickly paint up a scene. This is one of the fastest ways to do level editing within Fusion if you're not going to make yourself a level editor and you are using a tile-based program, or you are making a tile-based program, which is pretty common for a lot of Fusion games because a lot of people like to have pixel art, and pixel art frequently uses tiles. So this is probably the best feature for quickly making levels in Fusion. I definitely recommend you guys check it out. Alright, so this next feature is multi-select. A lot of people aren't aware that you can select multiple objects within Fusion at a time and change their parameters. So let's say we have these 4 different active objects and we wanted to modify them all at once to do some different things. We can just drag a box around them. Now, if you go over to the size, you can resize them all at the same time. You can also go in to the alterable values and add values at the same time, renaming them and giving them their value. So we could be like value 1, and we can set value 1 to 10. Now every single instance of these objects will have the same value, alterable value, with the same number associated with it. You can also add qualifiers, and now these will all have the engine qualifier because they were all selected. You can also do a multi-move. So this is a very useful feature that a lot of people don't seem to be aware of, so in your projects, I recommend you use it. So sometimes in Fusion, your projects can kind of get out of control and they're difficult to navigate when you have a lot of elements. And one way you can get around that and assist yourself in organizing is through the use of folders. A lot of you guys don't seem to be aware that this is something you can do, but you can. So what you want to do is to set up folders, click on your frame, right click, and select New Folder. That'll create a new folder within the frame, which you can rename in its properties. So we're going to go ahead and create 2. First one I'm going to call Actives. Second one I'm going to call Engine. And all you got to do is you can either do this through the workspace toolbar or over here. Okay, so we can then put these objects into their respective folders very simply. You either drag them over here on the workspace toolbar or over here in the object toolbar, and you stick them where you want them. So I could grab all these, throw them in the engine. And so you can expand and contract these, collapse these, and so you can quickly see what objects you have inside of each folders, or you can double click on the folders and go to them. So that is a really nifty and handy way of organizing your projects in Fusion. Alright, so this one is actually a new feature, but it's pretty handy. So what you can do is you can now name flags, and you can also toggle their initial state, rather on or off. So all you gotta do to do that is select your object in question, go over to the Values tab, and let's add a new flag. And so we're gonna throw some flags in here. We have flags 0, 1, and 2, and as you see, we can check them to set them on at start, or uncheck them so they're off at start. If we double click them, we get to rename them. So flag 0 could be like toggle full screen. So now we know that that's called toggle full screen, and within the editor, when we try to do something, it will be referring to the name of the flag, toggle full screen. So this is a good way of organizing your code and understanding quickly at a glance what each flag does. Before this was a thing, I used to have to keep big comment chains describing what each flag did inside of all my objects. So this is a very welcome addition. Alright guys, so this one is extremely useful, and if you use it, it will make you a much better Clickteam Fusion coder. And that is the use of the Contents tab. So if we go over to Help and Contents, you can find out all sorts of things about how Fusion works. So instead of trolling the forums and trying to figure out how things work by asking people and bugging them, you can just do the research yourself. There's tons of info here about all the specific things, the editors, properties tabs, everything you could ever think about it or want to know about Fusion is pretty much here at a glance. And furthermore, if you have an object that you don't know how to use, let's say for example the platform movement object, I'll throw this in here. Let's say you wanted to know how to use this, but it wasn't apparent, it wasn't initially obvious what did what. You can just go on over to the About tab and select Help. And what this will do is this will open up a help file, and you can read all about the object in question. Not all objects do have help files, but if you are unsure how to use or implement an object, that's the first thing you should go to is the help file and see if you can figure out what sort of things you can do with this object. Okay, so this next one is a handy little feature that a lot of you probably didn't notice you can do, and that is to lock and unlock objects and tiles. So let's say we wanted to, we had an element of our UI that we had in position and we never want to touch. That would be something we would probably want to lock. So if you simply right-click on what you want to lock, you can select Lock. It is now locked. It cannot be touched, it cannot be grabbed, it cannot be moved. We could select the whole screen and it will not be selected. So that is an awesome way to keep something pinned down so you will not accidentally move it around if you have it where you want it. But now the question is, how do we unlock it? That's really simple. Hold in Control, Shift, and then click on it. It is now unlocked and you can move it around freely as before. You can also use the multi-select to lock them all. They are now all locked. And I've unlocked them. There we go, easy peasy. Alright, so this next feature is global objects. Now global objects are extremely useful. What a global object is an object that is global. It will retain its variables and attributes across frames. So if you modify it in one frame and move to another, it'll stay the same. So we can make this object global. So the way we do that is select the object, go to the runtime properties and select the tab under memory options global object. And we're gonna do, instead of same name and type, we want identical objects. So now this will retain its information. So for example, let's throw this global object over here. I'm gonna insert a counter just so we can test this. Boom. Going back to frame 1. Okay. Let's make the background white. I don't know why that's black. Inserting a counter here. Alright, so what I'm going to do is on frame 1, I'm going to give one of these alterable values under our global object a random value. We will see it. Then we'll move to the next frame and we'll look at it. And it should remain the same because this object is global. So we're in frame 1. Start frame. We're going to give this alterable value a value of random 10. And then we're going to set the counter to the value of alterable value a so we can see what it was. And then on frame 2, actually hold on, we need to be able to switch frames, so we will do that this way. I will say keyboard space. We're just going to jump to the next frame. Now in the second frame, all we're going to do is grab the value of alterable value a and plug it into our counter. Let's run our app. Okay, so we have a value of 6, pressing space now, and we still have a value of 6. Now let's go ahead and try this. Let's take this object and let's make it not a global object. We're making them all local. All right, let's run it again and see what happens. We have a value of 2, and now we have a value of 0 when we switch frames, because in frame 2, it is not the same object. So as you see, global objects can be very useful for all sorts of things. I typically use them to create variable boxes, to have a sort of way to organize my variables that are relational. So for example, if I had variables that were controlling the options, I would probably put them all in one box, calling it like options box. And then I'd make it global so that the settings for the options were global across all frames. And that is the way I personally like to organize my global variables. All right, so this next one is going to actually have a few things on it because they're all relational. And this is going to be the global event editor, the event list editor, the behaviors editor, as well as grouping of events. Since these are all essentially event related, I'm going to put this all in one number. So here we go. So first, let's look at the global event editor. So we just go to View, Global Event Editor. Also Control H is my hotkey. And so what this is an event editor for all of your frames. So anything you put on here will run on every single frame. So this can be useful for things that you have to do a lot and you don't want to recode, especially since if you make an error, you won't have to fix it across frames. A good thing to do if you're going to do this is to set up groups of events and enable and disable them depending on what sort of needs you have at the moment. One thing to keep in mind though about the global event editor is that within it you cannot reference qualifiers. So that's a problem sometimes, but if you don't want to use qualifiers in your code, if that's not a big deal, and you do want to have this code be global, I do recommend checking out the global event editor. So next was the event list. Let's go ahead and slap some stuff together. Start a frame. We're gonna say, ultimate value set to 10. I don't know. And then we'll have another one here. Keyboard upon pressing. And then we're just gonna, set on a flag. Okay, so as you see, this is the default way of looking at Fusion, and it is not really great at a glance. You can kind of see which objects up here are being involved within your events, but you do have to do a lot of mouse overs to take a look at it. So if you want a more quick way to see what's going on with your code, I totally recommend you use the event list editor. So you click there on that button that says event list editor up here, or you can go to View and go to event list editor. And so what this does is it shows you, it expands your code so you can see both the conditions and the expressions all in one. And you can edit them by right clicking on them, and you can insert and add more. Or just modify them. So this is a very quick way to deal with your code. It's actually a more traditional way of looking at programming. So if you are coming from Fusion as a programmer or a seasoned coder, this might be the editor you want to use. So another thing to keep in mind, another event editor, is the behaviors editor. So what that means is objects can have their own behaviors. And this works very similar to global in the sense that you cannot reference qualifiers, but other than that, it's pretty good way of sort of organizing your code, because obviously your event editor can get kind of out of hand as your game progresses in complexity. So a lot of times you will have code that is only relevant to a specific object, and to deal with that, you should probably give it a behavior. So what you do is simply select the object in question. You want to go to events, and under behaviors, select new. So what we do is make these behaviors and then click on the ellipses and select edit. This will bring us up to our behavior editor. Now, like I said, you cannot reference qualifiers. Another thing you need to keep in mind is if you want to reference an object that's not currently on your list, you need to import it first. So click on the import new objects and select it. If you don't do that, sometimes your object will simply break and there's not much you can do but delete it. I don't know if if Clickteam has taken care of that or fixed the issue with it, but sometimes it just breaks things. So always select that import new object. And the reason that we don't see it now is because I've actually imported all the objects that are in my game. I just have these two. All right, so the last thing here on this number is going to be groups of events. Groups of events are a fantastic way of simply organizing your code or to get a more complex, more efficient code, because what you can do is organize code into subsets, which you can expand and contract, and you can also turn them off and on. So if your code's getting really long and you turn it off, a section of code, the program will no longer have to check those lines as it runs through, which will save you processes, which means your game will run better. So we do that this way. Right click wherever you want to have the group of events, and all you do is select Insert a Group of Events. You can name it. You can password protect it. I don't know why you'd want to do that. But you also can here select whether it's active or inactive when the frame starts. So let's go ahead and name it. We'll say Group A. So we just want to select everything that we want in here. Let's say I made a bunch of code and I think it makes more sense to have it organized into Group A. I would just hold in Shift, select both of these, and drag them in. Now I can double click on the group to expand and contract. So this is one of the best ways to organize your code so that it's actually readable, because sometimes, you know, you got 2,000 lines of code, it gets hard to find stuff. You can organize your stuff into headings and subheadings, and therefore contract it or collapse it, and it'll be much more readable. So that is definitely something I recommend for anyone who is going to have a more complex program within Fusion. And like I said, they can be turned on and off at runtime. For example, we could say upon pressing the space bar, we could go into the special conditions. We would go to group of events, and then there's activate and deactivate. So we could just say deactivate group A, and we press space. Now it would turn it off. So this is very useful for setting up sort of modes of gameplay. You can even, one thing you can use this for, which I like to use it for, is having the main program all set into one group, and then in sort of external program running, which will allow you to, which would be like the menu and stuff. And so you can actually use that to pause your main program. So everything will pause, but you'll still have your menu running outside. It's like the shell that's running your program. So this is a very useful feature. I do recommend you guys implement it if you are interested in having complex programs. Okay, so this feature is really useful for dealing with animations, and that is the MultiMove for hotspots and action points. So as you know, a hotspot is the point in which your sprite is created from. I imported this art. It has multiple frames, but I made a mistake. I imported it with center of gravity, meaning that this hotspot's moving all over the place. So if I were to have this sprite follow a invisible player object that I was using for collisions, it would be bouncing very irregularly, and that's not what I want. So instead of having to go into each one, select the hotspot, and then manually move it, which is a big pain in the booty, we can use the quick move. Instead of like selecting, let's say I want to center it around the sprite. I could either select like the quick move button and then move to each frame, or the easier thing to do is to hold in Alt and then press it. And that will move the hotspot for every single one of your frames. So that is the fastest way to modify hotspots and action points. All you gotta do is hold an Alt and reposition. And you can do this either with the quick move, or if let's say I put it in the top left, it's gonna be in the top left of all of them. So I can drag it around as well as use that quick move. But the quick move is really nice for getting the center. All right, so this one here is gonna be modifying the binary. So whenever you package files within Fusion, like let's say you called a sound file, it is going to be in the binary. Let's do this now. Let's set up a sound. Let's set up a sound trigger. So we'll say upon pressing space, and then we're going to play a sample. So I'm going to play the bite sound. So let's do it now. Okay, it's playing a bite sound when I play space. Now let's say that I didn't like that bite sound, but I still want a bite sound to play when I press space. But I just want to modify the file. Instead of like having to go into every single expression with that bite sound and then select a new file for that bite, I can simply go up to binary, which is right here under data elements. And we have the bite file right here. And all you gotta do is select it, and we can select replace. This will allow us to replace that sound file within the code, and now whenever we press space, a different sound will play. So that saves you a ton of time if you need to switch out sounds or files within the binary. So that is an excellent way of quickly moving sound files around or changing your sound files. If you need to do that, you do it through the binary. Otherwise, it's going to be a big pain in the butt and you'll have to do it through your code. Don't recommend that method. Definitely recommend you use the Data Elements tab. Alright guys, so that was 10 features you probably didn't know about Clickteam Fusion 2.5. If you knew them, good on you. You're probably pretty advanced at this, but if you didn't, I hope you found these useful. So as always guys, I want to thank you for watching this video. If you want to support me, please pound that like button and maybe subscribe if you're not, or go to my Patreon and donate to me because I do like money. Also, if you need help, feel free to email me or to comment on this video, or the best option, go to my Discord channel, link in the description, and there's lots of people there, including me, who will try to help you out with your projects and any problems you might be having with game design, not just Clickteam Fusion, any program you might be using. There's people there who like everything from Game Maker to Unity to, you know, RPG Maker. So, yep, thanks for watching guys, and until next time, have a fantastic day.